Self-relations. Hello guys, and today we are going to discuss about self-relations when a model has a relation between its own self. And it's a special case, but there are some times where you have that case happening. It's like, for example, in the documentation here we have successor and predecessor in the user model. So these two are related together. And in the first part of the video we are going to discuss about one-to-one self-relation. In the second one would be one-to-many, and the third one would be many-to-many relations. So let's get started in the schema, then code, and then we test it out. So here we have our models. Let me close it here a bit, and in here we have our models. I think better if I put it here. So in our model, what we are going to do is we are going to update our user, and in the user what we are going to do, a logic here would be, it will be an author and an editor. So we'll be having a relation between an author and editor. So the case being, the story being is, an author could write a book, but possibly he would make a mistake. He could edit on his own, but the issue being it will take some time. So possibly he could delegate that work towards another person, and that would be an editor. So an author could have an editor, and same as the editor could have an author. So that would be the one-to-one relationship. Now that's the first part of it. So it's a one-to-one relationship, and it can be an optional. The next part would be that who is taking the foreign key. Since the author requires the editor, the one who is requiring the foreign key would be the author itself. So that would be the things that we need to consider in this relation. So let's get started with it. So first things first, we'll just put the objects here. So we'll put here our editor, and that will be a type of user. The second part would be author, and it will be a type of user. Now the foreign key, as I mentioned, the author will take the foreign key. So we'll say editor ID, and the ID is based on an integer. Now the next part would be, we mentioned it will be an optional, so we'll add question mark for each of them. Now usually what we tend to add is annotation relation towards the one that requires the foreign key, right? So that will be editor. But in the user or self relation, we have to add more stuff into it. Not unlike this part, it's not enough if we mention here the fields, and the fields will be the editor ID, and the next part would be references, and we mentioned that the references would be ID itself. That's not enough, and the reason being is one thing, when we have this add relation, we are assuming that there is no other relation happening between the address, like for example the relation between the address and user. So we are assuming that there is not a second relation between the user model. So if you have another relation here, for example we have I don't know, let's just say user and then relation here. Now if you add that part, it will be having the same problem as what we have here. So to identify the relation between, because this one is related to the user as well, and this one is related to the user, so which one is it connected to this one, and which one is connected to this one? It doesn't know unless we specify it. Similar to what we have for each model or table, we have an ID to uniquely identify the data in itself, and for every user we know for sure this is John with a particular ID of 1, and no one else will have an ID of 1. We have to do that in our relation to prevent any duplicate relations. So in order to do that, what we'll be putting is, in order to uniquely identify our at relation, our self relation, we have to add something like a string before the fields, and that will be, a string can be anything that is unique. So it will be, for example, we'll call it author editor. Now that's the unique identification for the relation between editor and author, but in order for the author to know which relation to connect with the editor, we have to add an @ sign for the other one as well, and we have to mention the uniquely identification. Now that will be it. So that will be for how we are uniquely identifying the relation, and that's how we are going to do the one-to-one relationship. The editor ID, the editor, and author. Only the special part would be the string. You may see it for other ones, like similar what we have done here. If you have two relations in the user, you may have to do the same thing as we have done here, author, editor, and specify the unique identification as a string before the fields and references. So now let's try to migrate it, and what we are going to do is yarn prisma migrate, and we will call it author editor relation. Oh, I didn't recognize, yeah, because I didn't save it. Okay, now let's try to do again migration. Alright, I tend to forget to save it. Now we have saved it. The next part would be, we are going towards the code and we are updating the code. Now in here, what we are going to do is we will create a new endpoint, and the endpoint would be called router dot put, and in here we are going to talk about authors and ID, and we will mention update author. So in here, what we are going to do is we will create a function, and that function will update the author. So why are we updating the author? So we are trying to connect with the editor in itself during the update. So we will create first an author and we will create an editor, and then the next part would be, when we update the author, we are trying to connect with the editor during the update itself, when the author itself is updating. So we'll be using an endpoint called author's ID, and that will be a put method and update author. So let's go to our controller. In our controller, we are going to make a function below the update user, and we'll call it export const update author. So in here, we are going to do the same logic here. We'll say async and curly braces. Now this logic of update author will be similar as the one that we have done in our controller of the update book, and we will do the same thing here, whereby we have used the categories, and the categories we connected with based on the category ID. So we'll do that same here in our author, whereby we are going to connect with the editor based on the editor ID. So what we'll do first, step by step, we'll go ID, we'll the structure from the request.params. Next part would be, let me put that in an array sign. So the next part would be, we are destructuring the body itself, and what we'll be doing is we'll be asking for the editor ID, and we will take that as the, and then here we'll say author DTO. Doesn't matter what you specify. Now in here we'll specify request.body, and in here we'll be updated author, and what we are going to do is update. Now in here in our update, we are going to ask for the ID and we will cast it, and then the second part of the parameter, we'll create an object, and that object will contain first the author DTO as a spread operator, and the next part would be is we are going to update the editor itself, and within the editor object we'll mention connect, and what we are going to connect is the ID, particularly the editor ID. Now that will be the connection with the author with the editor. Now in the update, we have to create an update method in our service. So we will go to our user service and update it here. So what we are going to do in updates user, we are going to ask for the number, so ID, so say number, and in here we are going to mention return Prisma user update data user DTO, and we are going to ask for the ID, so that will be where ID. So that will be it. Now we have registered here. Am I missing something? Yeah. Update user, and that will be it. Now in our user.crowd, we are going to ask for the author, and we will put that in update author, and we have done it update author. Now since we have finished the connection between our updating function, now we are going to create an author, one author and one editor. So let's go to our Thunder client, and what we are going to do is we'll create a new request, and that request will be called HTTP, and we'll mention localhost 3000, and in here we are going to talk about users, authors, actually no, users. When we create something, we'll just use users, and in here we are going to talk about the body, so we'll say name will be author, and email will be author@gmail.com. We'll talk about password will be 1 2 3 4 5 6. Now let's run the project here on dev and send the data. Now we have sent the data for the author. The next part would be the editor, so we will create the editor here as well. So editor. Now before updating, now we have done edit and author, but before going to the put method, what we are going to do is we are updating a bit in our user.service, and in our user.service we are adding an include session. So an include as in when it has updated, I want to return some related models, and that will be the edit and author. So when we are going to the update function here, we will mention include, and in the include function we are going to say editor true and author as well true. Now let me rerun it. Now we are going back to our request here, and in our request we are actually, let me save this part, and then now let's say put, and in the put we are going to mention authors, right? And then the authors, what ID do we have? It will be 6, so we'll be updating the author of 6. Now in here what we are going to do is we are going to give the editor ID, and the editor ID is 7. So let's add that and just send it. And I got a problem, it seems. And what was the problem? Authors. Okay, users, authors, and 6. Oh, all right. I forgot. I had to say return here, return response updated author, and now when we have done that, it should be fine. So we'll go to our request again. See on dev. Now we'll go to our request here again, and we'll send that. And yeah, it seems to be fine. We got the author, and the author will contain an editor that will be the ID of 7, name, email, and password. So that's for the author and editor. Now another part where we are going to do is we are going towards the user.service, and in user.service, when we are getting all the users, we want to include the relation between the author and editor to showcase that one as well. So say editor true and author true. All right, now let me restart again. Alright, now we will go towards here, localhost 3000, and we'll mention users. Now when we go through the users, so the ID was 6, that's the author, and author contains the editor. So we have it here as well. The editor will have the author itself. Now in here we have editor as well, and the editor will as well relate towards the author because we already added it between them. So this one will have the update as well, where the editor will contain the author. So this is the author that it contains. And that will be it regarding one-to-one relation, self relation, where it was simple, it was fine, as long as we just had to do something special, and that special part would be only we had to add a unique identification for the relation. Now moving on, we are going towards the one-to-many relation. Now for the one-to-many relation, so self-relation on the one-to-many, we are not going to touch the user in itself, but we are going to touch about the category itself. Now what will be the category? We'll be having one parent category, and we may have several subcategories. So there are some times where you have one general category, like for example information or software engineering, and then under the software engineering category we may have several subcategories such as DevOps, backend, front-end engineering, or those kind of stuff. So that's how we are going to do it. Now, to make the relation, what we are going to do is we will call here, the first one will be the parent category. So let's just say parent category, and we will call this category. Now the second one would be subcategory, and it won't be called subcategory only, but it's a list. So because it's a list of categories, right? So one-to-many relation. So subcategories, and it will be a list of categories. The next part would be who is taking the foreign key, and the foreign key will be given by the subcategory itself. So subcategory, for each subcategory they always have the parent category. So what we are going to do is we are going to create a parent category ID. So parent category ID, alright, and in here we are mentioning the integer itself. Now we will add the question mark because this is optional. They don't have to have now the last, I think, should they have the parent category? They don't have to have a parent category. Like the parent category might have not another parent category, right? So let's just make an optional. They don't have to have the parent category itself. So now in here we are adding the annotation, and as we have done in here, we have to uniquely identify the relation between the parent category and subcategory. So we'll say relation, and in here we are going to mention here as well relation. Now what we are going to do in our relation, so that will be relation, we will mention parent subcategories, and that will be as well parent subcategories. Now in here we are going to mention, as what we have done before, fields, and in the fields we are mentioning parent category, and the reference would be the ID itself of the model. Now that will be it for the one-to-many relation. So now let's migrate on Prisma migrate dev, and then here we are going to say mention what was it, parent sub category relation. The next part would be we are going to update our categories here, similar to what we have done in user, but we won't create a new endpoint. We are just updating our category function, the update category function. So in here we have an update category function. So what we'll be doing here is we will do the same thing, same logic, request.params, and we are getting the ID itself, and that ID will be the particular subcategory that needs to be updated. So we will create one category, and we will be creating two subcategories, And then for each subcategory, we're going to update and contain the parent category ID. We will connect with the parent category ID. Now in here we are mentioning const, and we're going to mention request.body. And what we are going to get from the body will be parent category ID if it's there. If it's not, it's fine as one, and we'll say category DTO. The next part would be we are going to say updated category, and that will be update category. And let me update the async here. So async update category, and in here we are going to cast first, and then we're going to add the second parameter as object, and in the object we'll mention category DTO. And the second part would be we are going to say parent category. We are going to connect with it if it's possible, and that will be using the connect method or function property, and within it we are going to connect with ID, parent category ID. Now let's create the function. So we'll go to our update our category function in the service, and in here we are going to mention ID as the first parameter, and that will be number and type of number. And in here we are going to mention return prisma dot category dot update, and what we are going to do is data category, and we are not including the. Now in here we are going to mention the ID, and the third part would be we are going to include. And what are we including? We are including the two relations, and that will be subcategories true, and parent category to true. We are going to update as well the get categories, and in here we are going to mention the subcategories to showcase it later as well. Subcategories true and parent category to true. And that will be it regarding the one-to-many relation with the category. Now let's test it out. We are going to say yarn dev, and what we are going to do is create one category and then create a subcategory. So let's go to our Thunder client, and in our Thunder client we are going to go towards the categories endpoint, and in here we are going to create one called software engineering. We are sending that towards the endpoint. We have created one. Now we are going to create a new one, and that will be called backend engineering. Send that, and we are going to create another one, and that will be DevOps. Now we have three categories. Now let's connect. What we are going to do is the parent is the software engineering, the subcategories is backend engineering and DevOps. So let's update each individually, the backend engineering first, and we are going to use the put method, and in put method we are giving the ID of the backend engineering, that will be the 4, and in here we are going to mention the parent category ID, and the ID would be the parent, that will be 3. Let's update that and send it. Man, I tend to make a mistake every time. So let's go back to our category controller, and in our category controller we are mentioning return response.json updated category. So now in here we are going to say again yarn dev. We are going towards our request here, our Thunder client. In our Thunder client, let's just send it here again, and here we go we have our parent category that is connected with the backend engineering category. Nice. Now that's the for the backend engineering. Now let's do that for the DevOps as well. So we'll put ID of 5, and we won't be changing the parent category because it will be under the software engineering. So we'll put that, send it, and it works fine. That's great. So we have got the DevOps. DevOps will contain the parent category ID, and it has the parent category as the object. Now let's test out in the endpoint here. We are going to say localhost 3000, and we'll mention categories itself. Now in the categories, what we need to check would be 3 and 4 and what was it? 3 and 4? Which one as well? 3, 4, 5, I think. Yeah, 5, 4, and 3. So in here, that's the parent. The parent has 2 subcategories. So it has to, like, if you notice, it's an array. So that array is the backend engineering and DevOps. So it contains both of them. And for the other ones, backend engineering has the parent category of software engineering and parent category of this DevOps. And that will be it, I think. Yeah, that's great. We have done that one as well. Easy. What do they say? Easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? So now we have done this part. We have done the one-to-one and one-to-many relation. Now the easiest one would be the many-to-many relationship, and we are going to do that now. So let's go back to our schema.prisma, and which one is the unlucky one who will receive more relations between each other? And that will be, of course, the user. So in the user, we already have the editor for the author, but we don't have publishers. So possibly the author is very smart. So what he is going to do is he wants to publish in several places. So he's going to connect with many publishers, and the publishers the same. They have a lot of authors, and they publish a lot of based on the books of the authors. So it will be a many-to-many relationship. So publishers and authors, those are the relation between them. So in here we are going to create another relation here. We are going to say publishers, and it will be a list of user. The next part would be authors. So the authors will be a list of user as well. So that will be it. Now, the thing is, in the many-to-many relations, if you recognize it in the book and category, we just had to specify this, and that will be it. And like we had to add the relation. What was it? No, we didn't need to do the relation, and it was like an implicit relationship. But in here it will be the same, but we just have to add the at relation, and that will be it. We don't have to make anything else fancy here. So we'll say relation, and we are going to uniquely identify this one, and that will be author publisher, and we'll do the same thing in our authors here, and we'll say relation, and the relation will be author publisher. That's the uniquely identification, and that's it. Much more easier than the one-to-one and one-to-many relation. So we got our publisher and authors ready. Now let's try to update it. We'll say yarn prisma migrate dev name, and that will be authors author publisher relation. Now we got that ready. Now what we are going to do is update our code, and we are going to create one publisher, and we will connect them together. So we'll create again another new endpoint, and that endpoint would be called router.put, and we are going to create it as publishers, and in here the publisher will say update publisher. So we are going to update our publisher, and the publisher will contain the author that we are trying to connect with. So we'll save this, and we'll go to our controller. In our controller we are going to use the same function. So I think I'm too lazy now. I'll just copy and paste. So I'll say update author. So instead of update author, I'll say update publisher. So in update publisher, instead of asking for the editor ID, what we are asking for is the author ID itself. And in here we are going to say publisher DTO to make it sense, DTO, and we are going to mention here publisher DTO, so we'll take this publisher DTO, and the connect would be, we will connect with based on the authors, and we are mentioning the authors and based on the author ID. So that would be it for the publisher. So we just update our update author. We just took it and changed it a bit, where we took the author ID, and the author ID will be connected with the authors here. And we are going to get our update author, update publisher. So we'll take our update publisher, and that will be it regarding that. Now let's create our publisher and then connect them together. Okay, let's go to our Thunder client. In our Thunder client, we are going to go towards to the post here, and the post, what we are going to put in the body, we'll create a publisher. So let's just call it publisher, and in here we are going to talk about the publisher here as well, and try to send it. It's fine, it is working fine. Now we are going to go to the put method, and in the put method we are going to say publishers, and the ID of the publisher is 8. That's what we are going to update. And what we are going to do is we will take the author ID, and I don't remember the author itself, so let's go towards the localhost categories and actually users, and in here we are going to check the author. The author is the ID of 6, so that's the author ID. So we are going to add the author ID here, and let's try to send it. Send, and it worked fine. Now the thing is, I forgot to update in the service. So when we go to the user.service, we are going to add another thing, and that will be called authors. So let's add that part, and let's just say true. And in our get user, we are going to add authors true, and publishers true. Now let's try to run it again. Let's test out our put method first. We'll go to our localhost author ID of 6, just send it, and yeah, the publisher contains the author of 6. Now let's add as well another person, and that will be John. John, we are connecting with the John and with the publisher. So let's just say 1 itself of the user and send it. Now the publisher has 2 different authors. So 1 is the John, and 6 would be the author itself, and it has now a list of authors. Now let's get on with our localhost 3000 users and refresh it. Now in here we are going to see the author, so John will contain the publisher itself, and similar to what the newly created author, so the author will contain the publisher as well. And that's how we connect with the many-to-many relations. If you have noticed, it is a list. This one, it will be a list as well. And that's it for the self relation, whereby we have then the one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many relations. And that will be it for this part of the video, and I think that will be it for Prisma. So if there is any new videos possibly, then you will see it, and if there is none, hope you liked Prisma, and yeah, try to check it out, try it for yourself. And if you have any questions regarding Prisma, just let me know under the comments below. What was it? Description below? I don't know. Just put some questions down there, and if you have any questions, just let me know. Thank you. Take care.